As the founding host of Business Security Weekly, it's always a pleasure to have Michael Santarcangelo on as a guest. He has such great leadership wisdom and advice to share. In this throwback episode, Michael and I review the 4 C's of leadership: culture, collaboration, communication, and cultivation. All very important traits for leaders today. Grab your favorite C beverage, kick back, and enjoy the show.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly.
All right, we're going to go a little off script. Normally we would do articles, leadership, communication, but I got a chance to get Michael one-on-one, and we were chatting over the weekend like, what are we going to talk about? And I said, let's talk about leadership, right? You see a lot of different companies, right, out there, Michael, and you know, we talked about our acquisition a few weeks back, and leadership was a component of that. But I wanted to break into a leadership discussion a little more. And so as I was out researching this morning, I pulled some articles and I started getting my thoughts together, and I came up with 4 big buckets, what I call the 4 C's. And I'm curious on your thoughts. I mean, there might be more, but I'm curious. I think as a leader, you have to think about culture. You got to think about collaboration. Got to think about communication. And the last one I added is this concept of cultivation, right? I have to be able to bring talent up through the organization. And I thought those were 4 pretty good buckets to start with.
I think they're great. I just wrote them down, so I had them. No, it's really solid. In fact, let's I think a lot of people talk about different stuff. Let's talk about cultivation first. Let's dig into that, because I think it's a missing link in a lot of places and a lot of security leaders. Let me set it this way. Over the years of doing workshops and working with leaders directly, a lot of people say, well, what's your style? What's your model of leadership? And I think really candidly, none of that matters at all. What matters is this: if you're a leader, right, you lead people, you manage process, and you boss nobody. When my girls were younger, it was kind of cute when they were bossy. They're past that stage now. So no bossing. And so it's always bizarre when you hear somebody say, well, I manage people. No, you don't. You lead people. The way that we lead people is through the stuff here that we can go through. But what I think is interesting is that cultivation, because it then means that as a leader, one of your responsibilities is to elevate your team. Now, we can talk about it in terms of value. Matt, this is our stomping ground, right? But it means, do you understand in your activities which are high value for you and which are lower value for you, but might be higher value for somebody else that you can transfer to them? It could mean, do you understand the attributes of leadership in your particular organization? Do you have a pathway for those folks? And all sorts of stuff. So when you brought up cultivate, this is the one I think we have a lot of opportunity in our industry for. I think we're pretty good at entry-level stuff, maybe sort of, kind of. And if you've somehow survived long enough, congratulations. We slap the title leader on you, give you no extra training, 0 support, and you wake up one day and you're not an individual contributor anymore. Good luck. So I think, too, at least tell me in your perspective, does cultivate also mean we have to cultivate in ourselves some of these skill sets and abilities so that we can share them with our team and the people we serve?
I think we do, right? I mean, if we think about where our challenges are in this industry, it is bringing the next generation of folks in. We have to think about, how do we cultivate some of those skills so that we can transfer some of those skills to the next generation and use sponsorships and mentorships and other tools potentially that are out there to help cultivate and bring that next generation of security folks in. And I think if you're a good leader, you have to be able to help with that cultivation in some form or fashion, right? It is one of the driving principles when I came to Security Weekly and I was thinking about the future, is like, how do I get all of my employees to the next level? You and I talked about this a little bit, I think, a few weeks ago as part of the acquisition discussion. But how do I create career paths for my employees, right? How do I create career paths for the security analyst sitting in the SOC? How do I create the career path for that person coming straight out of college that has some interesting skill set, but maybe doesn't understand security? Cultivation goes a long way in a lot of those scenarios.
Oh, absolutely. And then take it a step further. There are people who just want to work in a SOC. They love it. It's their life's ambition. They're really good at it. And if you could just leave them the hell alone with all this other stuff, they'd be happy. I think that's okay. It doesn't mean as a leader I wouldn't want to push them from time to time or help them expose themselves to other technologies or techniques or things to learn or what have you. But I think what we tend to do all too often is say, hey, you're really good at that job, and I know you want all these other things. I'm just going to keep you there. But there's a flip side to this too, and I think you've probably encountered this. If I just go to the average person, I hate that I said average, but if we go to people and say, hey, what do you want? Go to a CISO today. Go to a security leader and say, what kind of security leader are you? Are you a founder? Are you a farmer? Or are you a fixer? What does that mean for the type of legacy? What are the conditions in which you're going to thrive? I ask that question a lot now, and commonly I hear, that's a good question. I don't know yet. So I think the challenge then too is not only are we cultivating our people, we have to learn how to cultivate the people that we're working with. And we have to understand how to help them see those different opportunities, figure out the ones that fit them, and then sometimes make the hard choice to realize they may not be the right fit for our team anymore. And I think that's where, as an industry, right, in the role that I've always loved that Security Weekly overall plays in that community side, I don't think there's any shame at all in security in helping people propel themselves up to leave and go new places. You know, you've probably seen it. Most of you listening have probably seen this, right? But what if we train them and they leave? What if we don't and they stay? I think when we cultivate people, don't worry about the training. Think about how you're educating them. What you see from a lot of top tier firms is they don't worry about that. There's two reasons. One, it's great because that the team that cultivates leaders and highly skilled practitioners, they never have an opening. Like, they don't have a problem finding people because people want to be part of that, but their network is fantastic. So when they have a legitimate challenge or problem, the goodwill that they've built up, the connections that they have, the resources that they have. So it's the difference between having a scarcity mindset when you're cultivating people. Well, why would I spend money on that? Why can't they do it themselves? How are they going to do? And an abundance mindset that says, this is good for the people. This is good for me as a team. This is good for me as a leader. And you know what? This is good for our industry. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, you bring up a very interesting point. Good organizations that can cultivate well will really never have, I think, a security shortage or a gap in resources. But what they are allowing to happen is an education to other businesses as part of our industry to actually move the industry forward. And I think that's a very positive thing. I would not want to look at cultivation as this, well, if I give them the skill sets and they're going to leave. They're going to leave if you don't give them the skill sets, right? So why not educate them? Why not benefit from that? Why not build a way so that I never have the shortfall, but if they leave, they go do great somewhere else?
Yeah, and then we all get better. No, I think I completely agree. And as you said that, I was thinking about it, and I don't want to name the names. There are some folks in our industry that have legendary security programs, have legendary technology programs. There's a waiting list of people that would love to join those teams. And when somebody leaves that team and they say, "Oh, I used to work at XYZ," oh, you did? Oh, well, then move to the top of the list. We'd like to talk with you. I think that stuff is great. You know what else is interesting when I've worked and talked with those teams? They understand the business understands them, they're patched in. So, if you take our last conversation with Dr. Lloyd and we talk about the orient aspect of it, they tend to be pretty well oriented, which means they're making that investment and they're doing it with the support of the entire organization, right? Which I guess could be a cultural thing. So let's touch on culture real quick. When you say culture, what's the vision that you have in your mind?
I think one of the big challenges in our industry is building a culture that is based on trust. We've had a lot of issues in our industry with FUD and some of the other things. And as I reflect back on my career and the moves I've made, the reason I left was lack of trust and lack of the right culture, almost in every single case, in some form or fashion. I'm not saying that was the only component, but I can tell you when an organization does things that I don't think are right and trustworthy and really build the right culture of success, I'm more likely to leave an organization than stay. And I think that is a very important component that I weigh a lot of decisions on. I mean, part of what's unique about Security Weekly is the culture. And I think the fear from the employees was I was going to change the culture. No, I embraced the culture to the point where we could continue to thrive. But you'll have leaders come in that try to change really positive cultures into another culture. And I think those get really, really dangerous sometimes.
No, I completely agree. And you know what I really liked best about your answer was you didn't say, well, there has to be a security culture. I know a lot of you like that. That's fine. And depending on how you use it, it's fine. But here's the challenge with that. So do we need a marketing culture too and a sales culture? Like it's, well, security needs to permeate the culture. Here's what I like better. What Matt just said. Are people trusted? Do you have accountability? By the way, we won't have time for it today necessarily, but there's a distinction, right? Everybody says, well, I want them to be held accountable. To be held accountable or to enforce it, to have accountability, you need three things. You need a clear understanding of the outcome, you need agency, and you need ownership. If you don't have that, you're never going to have accountability. And by the way, that what most people say when they want accountability is really consequences management. Fine. But by the way, if you're in an organization where you don't feel that you can be accountable or that other people aren't accountable, you don't want to be there. If you're in a place where people are burning out, where there's no trust, you don't want to be there. And I've started diving even more. I've looked at trust over the last decade or two. It's important. But what I'm finding is sometimes it's as simple, right, as one of these others that we'll get to. It's how well are you communicating? How well are you collaborating? Are you following through? Do you say what you mean? Do you mean what you say? It's the integrity and stuff like that. And I think that what we find is in these high performance organizations, in fact, one of the interesting things is if you want to have a high performing team, you need to have what they call psychological safety. Psychological safety means at some level that there's an element of trust that they can take that risk, that they can speak their mind, that they can say those things, and that those ideas are included, that those ideas are welcomed. So, a lot now we talk about diversity and diversity of culture, and I really like it when people focus too on diversity of experience, diversity of ideas, and we get that opportunity to sit with those things and to really include that into that process. Those are rich environments, and I think you're exactly right. A lot of times people don't leave because of money. They leave because the leadership wasn't there. They leave because there was a misfit of the culture. They leave for any number of reasons. Very seldom is it money.
Very seldom. Because, yes, I can attest to that. And one of the articles I pulled in here I thought was a little interesting on this topic is because the DoD is talking about building a zero trust network. Now, think about the DoD and the military for a second and kind of the instinctive trust relationship in those environments, right? A high-performing team, right? How do you build a zero trust model in an organization that has relied instinctively on having a level of trust? I just thought it was a very interesting kind of concept to think through. And think about that from a cultural perspective for a second, right? Can you truly effectively build a zero trust environment in the military or in the DoD where trust is kind of this inherent instinctive thing? Just a thought.
Yeah, and I think it's a great thought. I know some folks that have spent some time in those three-letter agencies and circles around DC, and I think though that they would come back and say we don't trust anybody. The three-letter agencies don't trust each other, and we have one whose entire focus is cryptology and looking at different ways to ensure that signals sent are the signals, in fact, that were received and that people are able to do stuff on it. So I think what's interesting is, especially when we look at high-performing military teams or if we look at high-performing sports teams, we oftentimes discount how much money and time and training went into the system that these folks get and the way that they do it. Now, what I think is also interesting, and I apologize because I didn't get a chance to read this article in depth, but I always find it interesting. I feel like zero trust is becoming one of those things now that's a little bit like, well, NPKI and what great concept, right? Blockchain. I love it. It's great. but wait, hold on. What does it mean when you say that? And I'm not putting you on a spot, Matt. I just mean, like, I think it's interesting because when we were talking to Dr. Lloyd and he was talking about this need to be, to orient better, I started wondering in my head, if how much of this can we handle? Like, okay, I don't know what's where. I don't have complete visibility. I'm not as oriented to the situation as I'd like. I'm almost wondering in the back of my head, is zero trust attempting, or is zero trust the answer to that, where we say, well, I can't see that much anyway, so I'm going to control what I can control, right? It's almost like the Stoic approach to security. I can control nothing, therefore I will only worry about these little pieces. I don't know. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah, deny everything and then open it up as you. That doesn't create necessarily a good culture sometimes, because there's this like instinctive trust in the environment.
I think that's the right point. Well, because what we're talking about now too is we say zero trust, and we tend to mean at a device or a data level, or depending on which model you want to use. And then this is where we bring in my favorite topic of friction. And by the way, if anybody ever says frictionless, unless they're a super lube, that's a canard. What you want is low path of friction for that which you desire, and an asymmetric path of friction, right? Higher friction for that which you don't desire. So am I going to have a frictionless environment internally? No, but I don't want one. But what I do want is, if you're an authorized user, if you're somebody on my network that I expect to be on my network carrying actions out, I want that correct path for you to be far easier, right? Less friction overall. But for me, the red herring is, it's frictionless. Stop. Please stop. It's not frictionless. And it doesn't need to be. That's not the goal. Friction isn't bad, right? If you've ever driven your car on ice or in the wintertime and suddenly you don't have friction, that's not good. Friction's okay. It's when we have too much friction that it builds up. And I think you're exactly right. When we start saying zero trust, well, wait then. So are we saying we don't trust our users? Wait a minute. That's insider threat. Wait, what? And I think then the culture has a real challenge. So let's push that to communication. Communications, look, I think maybe second to culture, I started asking this question early 2000. I'd work with a team. We used to do surveys, but just even colloquially talking to people. Hey, what's the big challenge? Communication. No one listens to me, and I never know what's going on. They don't tell me anything. And I think we have a lot of opportunities here, especially when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah, we do. And it ties into that other point of collaboration, right? In order to be an effective communicator, you also have to go out and understand what's going on, right? And that's a collaboration component. You have to go out into the employee base. You have to go out and talk to the business units. You have to collaborate with them so you're a more effective communications. I broke these apart, though, on purpose because you need both. And I was afraid that if you combine them into one, we miss the point here, which is a leader has to be willing to go to the different levels of an organization and understand what's going on in the trenches and across the different business units. That is a collaboration component. They need to hear, they need to listen, they need to understand what's going on. Then on the other side, they need to use that knowledge that they've gathered in the collaboration to be a better communicator to the whole. And you need both of those pieces, right? And I think this is where, to your point, security struggled with this. Why? Have we been effective collaborators? Or do we just sit in our ivory towers and say, no, this is how you secure an environment? And my answer is no, we do it this way or we don't do it at all. Or are you actually trying to collaborate with different business units to understand what's important, what they're trying to do, come up with solutions that work, and then effectively communicate that back out the other side?
Yeah, no, and I like the fact that you broke these apart. In a slightly more cynical way to look at it is, are you an order taker or are you a partner to the business? The business exists. The business is going to take on risks. That's part of why we were just talking about, what's the marginal utility of X amount more? And it's an esoteric concept. Not everybody needs to be at that, but I like how you broke this apart. I break them apart as well. When we look at communication, there's kind of two pieces to it. The first one is, can you influence without authority? And that's really where you need to be. And by the way, if you think that you have authority because the board said so or the CEO said so, check again, you don't. And the influence without authority is important because it means, are you able to communicate that value? Can you craft a better story? Can you communicate what counts? The other piece in both communication and collaboration, so this one will cut across the two, is, are you delivering business value? Are your results recognize this business value, right? We've all heard the old saw: if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, doesn't make any noise. I don't know the answer to that one, but I can tell you this one. If you've finished the project and you're super excited about all the value you've created and the business doesn't recognize it as valuable, you did not create any value. I don't even have to ask that as a question. And I think the problem a lot of us face in security today is we feel kicked. We get to Friday and we feel defeated. And we are knocked constantly, right? There's the tyranny of the urgent. And then there's this, what I call the unholy trinity of chaos, friction, and resistance. Now, those things rear their heads in both of these. And so if you take a look at what does it take for me to be able to deliver something of business value, it means I have to understand where the real priorities are in this organization and how to navigate myself to get those things done, or how to help my team create the space to get those things done. So that's going to bring us back to the collaboration. And when you're collaborating with somebody, it's learning what matters to them and then being able to express what matters to you, or to your point, how do we work together? Okay, I understand what you're trying to get done. All right, here's some areas that we think are potentially risky. By the way, as a pro tip, I've found most times if you ask someone what they're concerned about, they'll just flat out tell you. And they're pretty right. I've very rarely been surprised or had to really convince somebody that there wasn't a risk there. Maybe 20 years ago. Not now. Not today. Focus on those things. Collaboration then means not increasing that friction, right? To your point, Matt, not banging the table and telling them, this is how we do it. This is the only way to do it. What's wrong with you? And then, trying to stop it and slow it down and everything else. Those tactics have never worked, and they certainly don't work anymore now. So you're right. Collaboration is that ability to work with somebody and earn, right? We'll go back to our last stuff. Some level of trust, some level of accountability, some level of true partnership where you understand the role that you're playing and you're helping them achieve what they need to get done. Now, by the way, you can't do that if you're trying to do 30 to 50 things at once. You've got to understand where those real priorities are, and that's also where some of that collaboration comes in. But then on the communication side, it's also understanding how to craft that story better, right? And we've talked about this on the program. And this is part of the updates to the Straight Talk framework. There's a competency that we call craft a better story. And it's about understanding your context to identify the right characters, the right conflict, the right resolution, because of the value that it brings either to the audience or to the overall organization. And what we find is when we stop long enough, we can gather all those pieces together, explain it in a way that other people get it, and it changes them from, oh, cyber, spider, fire, kill it, to, oh, well, that's awesome. I need that. How do I help you? How do I support that? Oh, do you guys need another program? Do you need more help? Let's do it. And it's because we've taken that time to both communicate and collaborate. But no, those are super important. What did we miss? What else is there? No, those are all four.
That's all four. So that's my question to you. What did I miss? Is there something missing that is needed as part of leadership? We were joking before the segment with Dr. Mike Lloyd. He said maybe completeness. But
yeah, I think completeness could be there.
Missing?
I think confidence could be there. I think completeness could be there. Yeah, I'm looking down at some notes that I have. I think one of them could be command. I think competency kind of comes in. This would be a fun discussion for the future, especially with Paul and a few others, because I think we all come at this from a different perspective of what makes for competency. But if you think about it, let's go back. One of the things that's right. So I've talked about confidence of value, but there's also the command of your time. There's a completeness to this as well. I think you're right, especially if completeness means get stuff finished. We're really good at starting. And then unfortunately we have plates, and there's like 50 something plates spinning in the air and we don't know which ones to stop. Maybe the answer is we don't need to stop any of them. Maybe the answer is we can let 47 of them drop. It's tough to tell when you're moving at that high rate of speed. And I think that's actually our biggest challenge. I think part of the reason we feel defeated come Friday is we've been getting knocked around all day. A lot of the security leaders I work with describe it, and they describe it eerily similar. You get to Friday, you feel defeated, you dread the weekend. By Sunday night, your stomach's cramping up again, and you're just waiting to get kicked in the teeth on Monday. And you don't want that. And it's a horrible way to live. And it continually disconnects us from our value. And when we're disconnected from our value and our story, it's just this cascading downward spiral. So I think that fifth piece of it is something in there. I'm not even sure the right word. I mean, if anything, I would come back to some level of confidence, as long as, and you had an article that talked about, not being overconfident. And I think that's right. I think that there's some level of confidence in what you need to get accomplished, but not too much, right? There's a thin line between confidence and arrogance. And some folks like to jump rope with it. I'd recommend jump rope with something else.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's why I didn't go down the confidence path, but I think it's a very interesting one, is leaders have to understand that balance of being confident but not arrogant. And a lot of that comes through in communication, which is why I kind of bundled it there a little bit. Completeness is a very interesting point, right? As leaders, you have a lot of things going on, and maybe it is, can you complete? I am known as the taskmaster because that's just the way it helps me get through my day.
Gotta get it done.
Right? I got to get it done. If I don't get it done, it doesn't get off my list. If it doesn't get off my list, it doesn't get out of my email. That is the way I do it. I'm not sure all leaders do it that way, but there is a completeness aspect to me for sure.
And I want to come back to it because I like that word completeness. But as I'm kind of rolling this through my head, I'm looking at confidence. So I mentioned to you earlier today. So this stop feeling defeated on Friday thing, it's been a consistent trend with a couple of the security leaders that I've been working with recently. So I'm putting something together around that right now, and I came up so far with the 3 steps in order to feel less bad. Right. So here's the fascinating thing is, we're not looking to feel great. I mean, look, you can take a Xanax or drink some scotch and in a little bit, it's all good. That's not what people want. They just want to stop feeling kicked. And when we want to stop feeling defeated, we want to stop getting to Friday and questioning everything we think we know. So here's what I kind of wrote down at the top level, and I think this is interesting, right? So it starts out by commanding your time, which allows you to clarify your priorities, and then you need some sort of a system to be able to deal with this. The second step is to be able to demonstrate that progress with proof of value. And it's that ability, right? Even using something like an OODA loop, once you orient yourself, you make your decision, and then you act, and then you observe again what's changed, what's the situation, right? And you keep working through that, and that works really well. What's nice is it lets other people see the value, which means you see the value. And then when you review and you distill down, you pick one thing for the next week. But what's interesting about this is as I'm processing this, Matt, for me, it comes down to some level of confidence. You have confidence that you're going to do the right stuff with your time. You have confidence in the value that you're generating. You have confidence in your team to get these things done properly. You have confidence that you're demonstrating this proof and you're listening, right? You're collaborating and you're hearing it back. So I'm going to continue to agree with you that confidence is a really careful word. It's a little bit loaded, but I don't know. I like what we've been talking about. And I think part of it is if you're in that leadership position and you have that responsibility to give other people a sense of purpose and to help them feel that they're connected, right? This is an interesting thing, and maybe it's related. Maybe it'll spark an idea in you. But looking at from a human experience level, the 3 things we really need is we need to control our own growth, right? You're either growing or dying. And when you control that growth, it's really because of our ability to solve problems. And it turns out the harder the problems you solve, the more value you have the opportunity to create. And a lot of people feel disconnected from that right now. And so if you get to Friday and, I've answered 500 emails, maybe 500 a day, and I've been in meetings for 6 hours a day, it's pretty easy to not feel like you're growing or contributing or doing anything better. If we're growing, though, and we're solving problems and we're solving them to completeness, then we're contributing, right? And in the societal nature, we have this need to contribute. And what we want is to contribute something of value, to contribute something we have. And you can see this always because if somebody asks for help, most of our instinct is, okay, we'll help. And it's fascinating because we're afraid to ask for help. But when somebody asks for help, we're generally happy to give it, especially if it's in something that's easy for us to do. And that's all in that. And then to this third one is we want some level of recognition or acceptance. Now, I don't mean recognition like, hey, let's put a new plaque on the I Love Me wall. Or, hey, that comes with a check, right? It's the recognition like, hey, Matt, good job. I know you worked hard this week. You and the team kicked ass. I really appreciate that. I hope you guys have a good weekend. Not, and beers are on me. Or it's just that recognition that we solved a problem in a way that created value, contributed that value, and then got recognized for it. I think as leaders, if we're elevating, I always like to say, right, if we invest in ourselves, so that we can elevate the people around us are better tomorrow because of whatever actions we took today. As a leader today, take any of these C's, rename them, choose any alliterative letter you like. We need to have a pathway for our own growth so that the people around us are also growing. that they're able to contribute their best selves to something that they believe in. And it can't just be, well, security, like we protect things. That's not very exciting. And then that they contribute and get recognized for that contribution, sometimes with just acknowledgement because you were seen. So the interesting corollary to all this over the last 15 years of working on it is if you don't see your value, no one else will see it. And it's really hard to recognize or realize the value in other things. But the minute you see your value, other people see it too. And suddenly you're able to see that value in other people. To me, that's that confidence of value, which is something else I should probably work on writing up at some point. But I don't know, based on that little monologue there, what thoughts popped in your head?
I think contribution is an interesting other C because it brings in a few elements.
I
right?
like that.
So that's where I was heading. And I'm like, maybe contribution is the fifth C. And I'm not saying we stop at 5. I'm just saying, the first 4 were pretty easy for me to put on paper. The next couple, it's like, what's the right one? But you just brought up a very interesting point. And so I want to contribute back to you and say thank you for joining me today for this great discussion.
I feel recognized. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I want to give back, right? And so as a leader, I am contributing back by thanking you for joining me today. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.